Okay, slide 13, epistemology, study of knowledge. What does it mean to correctly say, I know? Right? Think about it. When you're watching a movie and you think you know what's about to happen or who the killer is or something, you have a hunch, and then it happens, and you say, I knew it, right? Did you really know? What does it mean to say you knew? Does it mean that before the evidence came in and it turned out to be the case that that person did it, you already knew it? Or did you only know it when the evidence and the proof came in? In which case you then, instead of saying I knew it, you should have said I know it, right? What's the difference? What criteria must be satisfied for something to count as knowledge? Right? Aren't there criteria like the criterion for a belief is that it has to at least be a thought, but that's not enough. That's necessary for it to be a belief. But it has to be a thought that you think is true. Otherwise, it's not a belief. Right? Which is why you can't say, I think today is Wednesday, but I don't believe that it is. Nor can you say, I believe today is Wednesday, but I don't think it is. Right? Because those are really contradictory. And that's a way of figuring out what the meaning of something is. Right? By taking part of the meaning component and negating it, and then putting it in a sentence, and you go, that doesn't make sense. Right? Okay. So how do you know whether or not you know? Certainly you have to know what the criteria are for knowledge, and then you have to know that you've satisfied those criteria. But if you don't know what the criteria are, or what the conditions are which show that you've satisfied those criteria, then you don't really know whether or not you know. Who's to say what the criteria of knowledge are? Well, who's to say what the criteria for belief are? I'm to say, and you're to say, because if these words have meaning, then we can analyze those meanings through the kinds of methods that I just examined or illustrated, that you simply reason about them and you try to apply your hypothesis about what the meaning is and use that in sentences that illustrate your hypothesis, and then see if those sentences make sense, if they work. Right? This is called philosophical analysis. Teasing apart the meanings of concepts, applying them in relationship to other concepts, and using common sense and analytical and logical reasoning and our grammatical intuitions, like that's not even grammatical, that doesn't sound right, so that can't be correct, right? So it's just kind of extraordinary examination of ordinary beliefs and concepts and terms and experiences. That's how we figure out. That's how we go about constructing an epistemology. Right? Who's to say? Intelligent minds who engage in critical thinking are the ones who are to say. Anybody can be an epistemologist. You just need to think deeply and examine your concepts and beliefs. So here's an epistemological question, but it's also partly a metaphysical question. Are there true facts? What does it mean to be a fact? If something is a fact, mustn't it be true? There can't be false facts, like fake news. Well, fake news is not real news, so it's not true, right? So there can't be fake facts. Well, there can be alleged facts that are presented as facts, but are not really facts. Then those would be kind of fake facts or false facts, right? But that's kind of like bizarre use of language. If something is a fact, then what it asserts must be true. Right? So this is just analytical thinking. Is true belief the same as knowledge? So remember my example. You're watching a movie, you have a belief about who the killer is. Comes out later on that it's true, that that's who the killer is. So you had a belief, which means you had a thought that you think is true, and you discover that it is true. So, but prior to your discovering that it was true, You just didn't discover that it was true, but you thought it was true. So you had a belief, something that you thought was true, and the belief was true, but you didn't know it until you discovered it, right? So true belief is not necessarily the same thing as knowledge. You're discovering that it was true, converted your true belief into knowledge, right? So what is that thing about? How do you come, when you discover that something is true, you come to know that it was true? Well, what's that new thing? Is it the same in every case? Well, no, because in a particular movie, certain circumstances and scenes show you that that was the killer. But in other circumstances, that's not the same. It happens in a tremendously vast number of different ways that we come to learn that something is true, right? So knowledge is not the same thing as a true belief. Well, what's the difference? What's that missing ingredient that converts true beliefs into knowledge? This is the key question in epistemology. What justifies our beliefs when they're true in order for us to consider them knowledge? Right? It has to be true. You have to think it's true. You have to believe it. It could be true, but you don't think it's true, so you certainly don't know it. And the third thing, we call that justification. What justifies your believing that it's true? If you have the right kind of justification, then it seems you know. How do you specify what justification is? That's a standard philosophical question in the domain of epistemology. And another big question in the domain of epistemology is, even if we could specify what that justification criterion is, does anyone ever satisfy it? In other words, do we know anything at all? Do we really know? What are the criteria for knowledge, and does anyone ever satisfy them? Those are deep, deep puzzles. We'll talk more about them